There is nothing quite like momentum. Momentum is a powerful force that multiplies two things. It multiplies mass by velocity. In other words, the more mass that an object has, the faster the object moves, and the more momentum that is ultimately created. For the sake of simplicity, and for those of us that needed a little more plain, here's what I've discovered, and that is that size times speed equals momentum. The size of something by the times the speed of that thing creates momentum. But here's the thing about momentum. It's not only something that relates to an object, it actually can show up in multiple areas of our lives. For example, at work, you can experience momentum as it seems like you just encounter one win after another. You can experience momentum as you get one sale after another. In school, you can experience momentum when it just feels like you're acing every test and every assignment and every project. It's like nothing goes wrong. In sports, how many of you know one play can change the momentum of the game? Like you can be losing and then suddenly it's like one play happens and everything just turns. It hinges on that one play and suddenly you start winning and then you crush the competition, right? Momentum is in your favor. But how many know momentum can also work in the reverse, right? At work, you feel like you can never catch a break. At school, no matter how hard you try, you always feel like it's never quite good enough. In sports, it just seems like you can never get the ball across the line. Here's the reality about momentum. When momentum is working for you, it makes you look better than you really are. And when momentum is working against you, it makes you look worse than you really are. That's the power of momentum. When it's for you, it's a great thing. When it's against you, man, it just seems like nothing can go right. Well, during this series, we're going to look at some areas of our lives and what it looks like to build momentum in those areas. And we're starting with our spiritual life. In the Old Testament book of Exodus, we read the story of God raising up a man named Moses who delivers the Israelites out of Egyptian slavery. In fact, we read the story in the book of Exodus, and that word Exodus actually refers to the exodus out of Egypt as God delivered the Israelites. Well, after the people exit, God gives instructions to Moses to share with the Israelites. And these instructions include several things, such as the 10 Commandments, how they should live, principles on justice and social responsibilities, and even the festivals that they were to celebrate. But then the Lord concludes his instructions with a powerful promise for his people. And coupled with that promise are some important truths, and we find them in Exodus chapter 23. From these instructions this morning, I want to take a moment and share with us 4 powerful insights to help us frame spiritual momentum. Here's the first truth we discover in Exodus, and that is that spiritual momentum is future-focused. It is future-focused. Look what Exodus 23, verse 20 says. God is speaking to Moses, and he says, I will send an angel ahead of you to protect you as you travel and to bring you to the place which I have prepared. Notice, God's intention was not that the Israelites simply be delivered out of Egypt, but that they actually be brought into the promised land. This was a deliverance that not only dealt with their past, but ultimately led to the future, to something greater that God wanted to do. And I think there's an important truth for us to grasp here today for our own lives, and that is that God doesn't just want to deliver you out of, he wants to bring you into. God doesn't just want to deliver you out of addiction. He wants to bring you into freedom. God doesn't just want to deliver you out of depression. He wants to bring you into joy. He doesn't just want to deliver you out of fear. He wants to bring you into peace. Whatever he delivers you out of, there is something else he wants to bring you into. That's the kind of God he is. And here's the amazing news. The place he wants to bring you into has already been prepared for you. It's not an afterthought. The passage I read earlier to our graduates, that God is the God who wants to He's calling you to do good works. When did he prepare those good works? Before you, in advance of you. He has something he wants to bring you into. So spiritual momentum begins, hear this, when you let go and look forward. When you let go of whatever it is that's holding you back, whatever that weight is, whatever that 500-pound weight is that's holding you back spiritually, when you choose to cut the cord on that thing, to cut the chain on that thing, suddenly you're free to look forward and to step into what the Lord has for you. Spiritual momentum is future-focused. And as long as you're looking in the rear-view mirror, my friend, you'll always wreck. Number 2, spiritual momentum requires obedience. Now, as soon as God announces that he has prepared a place for the Israelites, a place that we know of as the promised land, notice what he says next in verses 21 through 24. Pay attention to him and obey him. Do not rebel against him, for I have sent him, and he will not pardon such rebellion. But if you obey him and do everything I command, I will fight against all your enemies. My angel will go ahead of you and take you into the land of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will destroy them. Do not bow down to their gods or worship them. And do not adopt their religious practices, destroy their gods, and break down their sacred stone pillars. What is God saying here? God is saying that, hey, I've prepared a place for you, but the only way you're going to experience the fullness of that place is if you walk in obedience. And in this passage, here's what's interesting. Obedience is expressed in 2 different ways in this passage. The first way obedience is expressed is through our actions. Because what did God say? In this passage, God said, do everything I command. Do everything I command. In other words, align your actions with my commands. Align your actions with what I have commanded you to do. In fact, if you back up just a few chapters, you see where God gave the 10 Commandments to Moses to give to the people. This is what God was giving to the people. This was what God was commanding. And here's the thing. They weren't just commands that, oh, hey, let's hang those on the wall. No, they were commands meant to align our lives to. Before he passed away, author and pastor Tim Keller talked about attending a conference years ago. And in this particular conference, he heard a speaker talk about the importance of surrendering our lives fully to God's will. Fully to God's will rather than our own will. And the speaker challenged the audience with 2 questions. And here's the 2 questions he challenged them with. The first question was this: are you willing to obey anything the Bible clearly says to do, whether you like it or not? And the second question he asked was, are you willing to trust God in anything he sends into your life, whether you understand it or not? How many know those 2 questions? Number 1, they're hard questions. And number 2, they're pretty spiritually challenging. And the speaker said this, they said, if you can't answer affirmatively to those two questions, that you're willing to obey anything the Bible says, whether you like it or not, regardless of your opinion, your thought, how you feel, and that you're willing to trust God even in the things that you don't understand, he says, if you can't answer affirmative to those two questions, being willing to do that, he said, then I'm not sure what Jesus you're following. He said, but you haven't said to him, I am your servant, Lord. I am your servant. You see, one reason we don't experience spiritual momentum in our lives is because we practice selective obedience. Selective obedience. In other words, I'll obey this, but that, God, that seems really outdated. I don't think that's good. I'll obey this. Hey, this leads to blessing. I'll obey this. But this, come on, God, really? I mean, do you realize it's 2025 and here's how we do things now? Like, this just doesn't. Selective obedience, friend, it may sound good, but it does not attract God's grace. It may feel good, but it leads you into a ditch. It causes separation between you and God. Listen, you cannot call Jesus Lord if you're allowing your sin nature to lead. You can call him Lord. You can say, Lord, like Jesus, you are Lord. But I'm telling you, he's not really Lord over your life if the thing that has the control of your life is your sin nature. If you're saying, man, I'm going to kind of do whatever I want, feel, whatever I feel, like that's my path. I'm telling you, it's leading you in a direction opposite of the perfect will of God for your life. Selective obedience. Here's a second way obedience plays out. It plays out with our actions, but secondly, it plays out in our allegiance. Our allegiance. What else did God say in this passage? He said, do not bow down to their gods or worship them. In other words, your allegiance is to God and God alone. Your allegiance is not to any idol. Your allegiance is to no other thing or to no other person. You see, obedience is not just a matter of action. It is a matter of allegiance to him, to God above everything else. So I've kind of gotten in your face a little bit already. We're going to take it one step further. You ready? Here we go, all right? Hear me. Does God have your allegiance when it comes to your time? Does God have your allegiance whenever it comes to sex? Does God have your allegiance whenever it comes to alcohol? Does God have your allegiance whenever it comes to your money? Hear me, friend. Because if he doesn't have your allegiance in those things, listen, those things have become an idol in your life. And you have said, God, these areas are off limits to you. Yeah, but Stephen, you don't understand. I probably don't. But it doesn't change the truth of his word. Is your allegiance to him above everything else? The truth of the matter is, in all four of those areas, every one of us have had to deal with them in some way, in some measure. And we have to ask ourselves, God, are we willing to show allegiance to God in areas even whenever it becomes uncomfortable? Obedience is not just the actions of our hand. It is the allegiance of our heart. Who gets to be Lord? And hear me, you may say, well, Stephen, is it just about obeying a big, long list of rules? If that's your interpretation of obedience, my friend, you have a skewed view of God. You have a skewed view of God. You say, what do you mean? God is not just this big, mean rule maker in heaven. And oftentimes when we think of obedience, that's how we interpret God. We think, well, God, all you care about is just killing my fun, killing my joy, killing my plans, God. Lord, God, that's all you care about. It's just another rule. I got to do this, and I got to do this, and I can't do this, and I can't do that. And we just get in this rat race. Hear me, my friend. Obedience that is driven by rules is legalism. Obedience, true obedience, is driven by love. It's saying, with everything God has done for me, how could I not obey him? It's obedience that says, no, the reason I'm doing this isn't to put a check mark by a list, by a rule. No, I'm doing this out of my love for God, out of my love for him, because he knows what's best for me. He knows what's best for my life. I'm doing this because how could I do anything else with all that he's done for me? Number 3, spiritual momentum attracts provision. Now, I want to be careful here because I don't want this to be misinterpreted. So hear my heart here. We don't obey God to get something from God. Okay, let me make that clear. That's not the motivator behind obedience. We don't obey God to get something from him. Let me tell you what else. We don't obey God because he owes us something. That's right. Because he doesn't owe us anything. He gave his son, Jesus. I think he went above and beyond. Okay? He didn't owe us anything else. He didn't owe us that in the first place. He didn't owe us anything. But he did so out of his extraordinary love for us. But God did make a promise to the Israelites that if they'll worship and obey him, that he would provide for them. In fact, we read about it in verse 25 through 28. Look what it says. God said, if you worship me, the Lord your God, look at those next 3 words, I will bless. Not I might, not, well, you'll score a few extra points and you're tilting me in the right direction. No, he made a declaration. I will bless you with food and water and take away all your sicknesses. In your land, no woman will have a miscarriage or be without children. I will give you long lives. I will make the people who oppose you afraid of me. I will bring confusion among the people against whom you fought, and I will make all your enemies turn and run from you. I will throw your enemies into panic. What is God doing? God's saying, hey, listen, if I have your full allegiance, you're not worshiping any other God. If you obey me fully, here's what I want you to know. I'll bless you. I'll take care of you. Now, when we read that passage, the first thing that may be coming to your mind might be, well, Stephen, I've been sick before, or I've had a miscarriage, so does that mean that I was in sin? Does that mean I disobeyed God? And no, that's not what that means. Hear me. I've been sick plenty of times. Karen and I have personally experienced 3 different miscarriages. In none of those situations were we in sin or disobedience. Okay? So what's this saying? God is simply saying, this is how, Israel, this is how I'm going to bless you. God can choose to bless however he decides. And how he chooses to bless them may look different than how he chooses to bless you. Yes. Being blessed is not a matter of being void of any pain or hurt. Right. So don't mix up and say, well, gosh, I've experienced that. I must have been it. No, it's just, here's the reality. Sometimes God may choose to bless one person one way, another person another way, because he knows what's best. And so it's saying, hey, God, I'm going to trust you in all of that. So the point is simple. When we're obedient to God, he is faithful to take care of us. Amen. However he sees best fit. Over the last couple weeks, you've heard both Karen and I talk about God's call, how God will call us. And here's the thing, if you've been around Seven City long, you've heard me make this statement, and that is that what we do on Sunday mornings is extraordinarily important. But so is what you do on Monday mornings. Like what you do for work matters to God. It matters to him. Number one, it was God's plan that we would work. Even before sin entered the world, work was part of God's plan. And not only that, but work brings flourishing to the world. And if you don't believe that, just ask yourself, if what I do for work did not exist in the world, how would that aspect of the world fail to flourish? Our work helps bring flourishing to the world. When we do our work, you're bringing flourishing to people's lives. You're bringing flourishing. The world is able to operate the way it should operate. If that's removed, suddenly it cannot flourish the way that it needs to flourish. Your work matters. It matters to God. So we've driven that message for the last 12 and a half years. And I think sometimes perhaps we've overlooked that yes, work, it might be in business, it might be in education, it might be in government, it might be in arts or entertainment or media or the social sector or healthcare or whatever. And sometimes in my effort to make sure we understand that your work matters, I've kind of not drawn attention to, and that also applies to vocational calling in terms of ministry, meaning church work or missions work. That matters. It matters. It matters. It's part of what God calls people to. Now, just understand, I think all work is calling, okay? So please understand, I'm not saying if someone says, well, I'm called to ministry, I think we all are. Yes. If you're in education, you are doing ministry, my friend. Yes. If you're in business, you are doing ministry, okay? If you're in government, you are doing ministry, okay? It looks different, perhaps, than what's happening in church or trust me, it still is ministry, okay? All right? I don't have time to go into this scripturally. No, just trust me here, okay? It matters. It's important to God. It matters to him. It is ministry. But in that effort to drive that home, sometimes I fail to say, hey, some of you are called to church ministry. Some of you are called to missions. Some of you are called to some form of vocational ministry that he's prompting you to take that step. And the reason you haven't is because you're afraid God won't provide. The reason I bring this up is because spiritual momentum attracts that provision. Hear me. When you obey, you attract the grace of God. What is God's grace? It is favor. It is unmerited favor. It is favor we don't deserve, but yet God chooses to extend. When you walk in obedience, you attract his grace. Unless you're arrogant. And he's got another thing to say about that. He says, anyway, yeah. So I bring this up because here's the thing. Some of you, you are called into some area, and the question you're saying is, yeah, but how am I going to pay the bills? Yeah, but how am I going to fill in the blank? And you're looking at that saying, I know this is what God is leading me to do, but I cannot calculate in my head how God is going to provide and meet this need. And here's all I can tell you is this. Throughout mine and Karen's ministry journey, there have been multiple times where we have transitioned from one thing to the next, and every one of them was a big step of faith. Every one of them. On one of them, it's like, okay, we're leaving everybody we know to move 900 miles away to be with absolutely nobody we know to do what we feel like God has called us to do. On another occasion, we had to raise support, just like a missionary does, for our own salary. We'd never done that before. On another occasion, we planted this church, right? It's like, how's this going to happen? Every single time, it was a step of faith. And listen, all I can tell you is this. Every time, God was faithful to provide. Every time. Are you saying, Stephen, you had everything you wanted? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying every time God faithfully provided our needs. You see, sometimes we look at things, steps like this, and we go, man, God, if you can't do this and this and this and this and this, then I'm not in. And I'm just going to tell you right now, the call of God requires sacrifice. So if you're not willing to sacrifice, friend, then you're barking up the wrong tree, okay? It's going to require sacrifice. But hear me, God will provide and meet your needs. In those moments, like, did we have everything we wanted? No. Did we have the best car and the nicest house? No. Just look at my very first car, right? I mean, no, we did not have those things. Does it mean we had every want we ever wanted? No. But we had every need that we needed met, because God was faithful to provide. Obedience attracts his provision. Obedience attracts God doing what we need him to do. God provides in the place that he calls us to. Hear me, I would rather have my needs met in the center of God's will than my wants met outside of God's will. The question is, am I willing to take the step of obedience? Am I willing to trust him? Because when you do, you start building spiritual momentum in your life. I'm just telling you, you want to stop the spiritual momentum in your life? Stop obeying God. Start being selective in your obedience. Your spiritual momentum will come to a screeching halt. Spiritual momentum forms when it's one step of obedience after another, after another, after another, after another, trusting him each step of the way and saying, God, I can't figure this out and I don't understand, but I know you will. And that's when momentum begins to build, and God is faithful in that. And that brings us to our last point. Spiritual momentum has a consistent pace. A consistent pace. You say, what do you mean? Look at verse 28. God says, I will drive out the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites as you advance. I will not drive them out within a year's time. Get this, don't miss this. This is so powerful. I will not drive them out within a year's time. If I did, the land would become deserted and the wild animals would be too many for you. Let me just stop right there and say this. If God blessed you in the measure you want him to right now, it would probably crush you. So what does God do? He blesses you in the measure that you can handle right now. And oftentimes that's a little bit at a time. It's a little bit at a time. Because he recognizes, if I released all of it, your character couldn't handle it. The blessing would be too much for you to handle, because suddenly it would pull you off track. Your allegiance of your heart would begin to shift. And haven't we all seen it? Somebody comes into a windfall and it destroys their life. Why? Their character couldn't handle the blessing. And so God says, I'm not gonna do this all at one time. I'll drive them out within a year's time. We're gonna pace this out. And then look what he says. Instead, I will drive them out. What's this next phrase? Little by little. Until there are enough of you to take possession of the land. Look at that phrase. Little by little. God wasn't going to give them the promised land in one giant swoop. Instead, God was going to bring them into the place that he had promised. Little by little. How many know that goes completely against what our culture tells us? Because our culture tells us, no, you need all of it right now. You need all of the promised land right now. You need all of the growth right now. You need all of the blessing right now. You need all of the financial provision right now. You need all of the promotion at work right now. But it doesn't work that way. Ask the graduates that we just recognized. Did graduation day come the day they signed up for classes? No. No. It was little by little. It was one test at a time with dozens of tests. It was one assignment at a time with dozens of assignment. It was one book at a time with hundreds of hours reading and studying and preparing. Until suddenly, graduation shows up. Little by little. When I was working on my master's degree years ago, I was sitting at lunch with a friend one day. And I'm just going to be honest, I was complaining about the journey. And the reason is because I was in the middle of the journey. Now, you have to understand, it took me 5 years to complete my master's, okay? I'm slow, okay? I'm sorry, okay? It just took 5 years, okay? And so this would have been around the 2.5 year, 3 year mark, in probably closer to 3 years. And I remember, at that point, the excitement of starting is faded. And the light at the end of the tunnel, you can't even see the light, right? You're stuck in the middle. And you're like, this is just, man, this kind of stinks. And I remember I'm sitting at lunch with my friend and I'm complaining that, gosh, I just feel like I'm never going to finish this. And I was, if I calculate right, I think I was 42 years old at the time. And so that meant I had 2 more years to go and I would be 44 when I would graduate if I stuck with it. And I remember my friend looking at me and saying something, and it's so simple, but on that day it was so profound. On that day he said, well, Stephen, he said, you're 42. He said, you can be 44 years old with a master's degree or 44 years old without a master's degree. Either way, one day you're going to be 44 years old. And I don't know why, that's so basic and so simple, but that completely reframed things for me that day, where suddenly I thought, he's right. He's right. And if I don't want to, when I'm 44, wake up with regret because I quit halfway through, then you know what? He's right. Little by little. Little by little, the dream is going to come. Little by little, the provision will come. Little by little, you'll get where you're wanting to go. Little by little. If you'll just stick with it. If you'll keep being faithful. If you'll keep being obedient. If you'll keep saying yes to the Lord. If you'll keep putting in the time, putting in the energy, putting in the blood, sweat, and tears. Hear me, little by little eventually leads to your legacy. The legacy that you're going to leave for future generations, by the way, little by little. We think legacy is one big swoop. No, your legacy is built over a lifetime. You see, here's the thing. We all want a legacy worth remembering. The problem is we don't want to write a legacy worth recording. Because writing a legacy worth recording takes time, and it takes commitment, and it takes discipline, and it takes focus, and it takes energy. We want a legacy that people will celebrate. We want a legacy that people will remember. I'm telling you, the legacy will not be there if you don't do the hard work of writing a legacy worth recording. Are you willing to do that? You see, we oftentimes think, well, man, I just want it all to happen now. It just doesn't happen that way, and we know that. And it's the same, hear me, friend, it's the same in our spiritual lives. It happens little by little. Little by little. It's saying, I know when I sit down to read my Bible in the morning, like, it doesn't feel like every day is just this God showed up in glory and the curtains opened and God's presence filled the room, and it was a fog, it was smoke, it was like God physically was there. No, that doesn't happen. It's not like every day you're like, man, it's like God gave me a hug today. Yeah, sometimes, but it's not every day. Sometimes you're just reading. And you're inviting the Holy Spirit to speak to you. And in his still small voice, he speaks. Little by little. It's not one big prayer. It's not one big prayer meeting. But it's every day, little by little, I'm going to pray. It's, hey, every Sunday, Little by little, I'm going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep worshiping. I'm going to keep seeking him little by little. And friend, hear me, when you go little by little, eventually you leave a legacy that people go, they were faithful. They knew God. They knew him. Because they didn't blow in, blow up, and blow out. But little by little, their faith was formed. Let me wrap up with this. In the year 516, Benedict of Nursia wrote the book, The Rule of Saint Benedict. And in it, Benedict divides the day into 8 prayer periods. Not 1, 8 prayer periods. Count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 prayer periods. What was Saint Benedict doing? He was creating a rhythm of prayer that led to spiritual momentum. But Benedict's rule of life was actually patterned after a more ancient rhythm dating all the way back to King David. You see, in Psalm 119, verse 164, David said, I will praise you 7 times a day. Think of that. 7 times a day I will praise you. You see, according to rabbinic tradition, David hung his harp over his bed by an open window. And when the north wind would blow into his room, it would hit the strings of that harp and they would slowly begin to make the sound of music. And when David would hear it, he would wake up. It was like his alarm clock. And David would rise up and he would begin to study the Torah in the early morning hours. And perhaps that's why he wrote Psalm 57:8. David said this, wake up, my heart. Wake up, O lyre and harp. I will wake the dawn with my song. How did David become a man after God's own heart? Maybe it's because he praised 7 times a day. Little by little, step by step, move by move, David was building spiritual momentum. He was writing a legacy that today we still read about. You may go 7 times a day. I'm not sure I can do that. Look at Daniel. When the heat was on in Daniel's life because he would not worship the king, and the threat of the lion's den was made, what did Daniel do? Daniel did, Scripture says, he did what he had always done. Meaning he didn't do this because the heat was on in that moment. He did this because it was habit. And that was he prayed 3 times a day. And God delivered him. What was Daniel doing? Over years of his life, he was building spiritual momentum. Little by little, day by day, step by step. So this morning, let me ask us, what are we doing intentionally to build spiritual momentum in our lives? Spiritual momentum that's going to last. Spiritual momentum during the good times and the bad times. The fun times and the hard times. In health and in sickness. What am I doing to keep spinning that wheel? To build that momentum.